I published a book recently called Brands and the Brain, and somewhere along the line, Rajiv kind of picked up that book, and I got a call saying that he thought it might be useful for me to talk about neuroscience and applications in out-of-home advertising. So here I am before you. My training is in behavioral psychology and neuroscience and in the applications to pricing and branding. And so I'm going to try and extend that into my conversation with you on how it might help in out-of-home advertising. So I'm going to draw from the stuff that I've got in the book, where essentially one talks about how our brains function and how that plays into how we perceive stimuli like out-of-home advertising, whether it is digital or billboards or something else, and therefore what we can do to be able to measure. Mark Bracey was talking about measurement. What we can do to assess the impact, given this is what's happening inside the head, what we can do to measure the impact that my out-of-home advertising is happening. So on the agenda today for me is essentially out-of-home advertising. So before I came to this convention, I thought, let me kind of figure out what some out-of-home advertising looks like. So this is what I came up with, the digital part, which was recently run by CVS in New York Times Square. And what blew my mind was some of the numbers that you see at the bottom. 3.6 billion earned impressions, 1,700 total earned placements, and many other beauty brands are showing commitment to being transparent in their marketing, and the average sales volume were up following the announcement. Now that's the interesting part. So clearly this digital is having an impact. So how is it having an impact, the digital OOH, and how do we evaluate the impact? So can we have the AV now, please? Let me start off with an advertisement over here. So this took place around 7-8 years ago. I hope some of you guys recognize it.
क्या आप अपनी डेयरी मिल्क का एक छोटा सा बाइट देंगी?
क्या मैं आपको जानती हूँ? तो?
मेरी माँ कहती है कोई भी शुभ काम करने से पहले कुछ मीठा खा लेना चाहिए, काम अच्छा होता है।
वैसे क्या शुभ काम करने जा रहे हो?
मैं सोच रहा था कि आपको घर छोड़ दूं।
शुभारंभ, कुछ मीठा हो जाए।
So I don't know how many of you guys remember seeing this some time ago. I'm sure it recalled some instances of our own youth. And when I saw it for the first time, I kind of wished, I had seen this when I was 17, 18, or 19, so I could have done something like this. Quick show of hands. How many people liked this advertisement? Right? So a fairly large majority like it. And the question is why? And that's what we're going to spend the next 15 odd minutes trying to understand. Why do we like it? And in the process, I will try and make some translations for out-of-home advertising or digital out-of-home advertising. So this is what we want to understand. Ultimately, we are selling brands for our customers through digital out-of-home or just out-of-home. So we want to understand what is the brand in the brain. Why does this particular advertisement of Cadbury's appeal to us so much? And so to do that, we want to understand how our brains function, what are some key brain operating principles, and how we use our memories to make a sense, to assess whether or not we like something. Let me start off with some hardcore science over here, right? If you read this, what is it telling us? Leave the jargon aside. What is it telling us? It is telling us that when a favorite brand, when a like brand is in front of me, the part of brain which is more emotion driven becomes more active. And it is also telling me that the part of my head which is driven by reason, by logic, becomes less active. I'm not making it up. There's now enough evidence which demonstrates quite conclusively that this is what happens when I'm seeing a favorite or a like brand in front of me. I literally become more emotional, less reasonable, less logic driven. And so therefore, if my brand, if my messaging can appeal at certain level to the emotions of the person that I'm engaging with out of home advertising, then I'm in a better place, right? That's your head. Those are some parts of the brain. And when we make choices, when we like an advertisement, when we like the Cadbury's advertisement, one of the reasons we liked it is that that combination of conscious, unconscious, reason and logic is working. When the boy asks the girl, you know, and says to her, मेरी माँ कहती है कि कुछ शुभ आरंभ, कुछ अच्छा काम करने के पहले you should have something sweet. What is he essentially appealing to in all of us? It's a procedural memory that all of us have, right? We grew up in India on auspicious occasions, on happy occasions, we have something sweet. You know, I remember my grandmother telling me before going on a journey, beta dahi chini kha lo, right? So that's what we grow up with. It's unconscious, automatic. And Cadbury's is very cleverly inserting that into my head unconsciously. And by putting it in a context, boy meets girl, I can relate to it, whether you are a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 50-year-old, you can relate to it. And that combination kind of triggers stuff in your head, which makes you like it. So how does your head work? Brands, of course, we know, are like this. The Cadbury brand, you could argue, is something like that. For many of us, we grow up with Cadbury's. You have actually some level of affection for Cadbury's as a brand. It's not just that I know the name or it's nice chocolate. It makes me feel good, right? That's what a good brand does to you. So therefore, how does the brain actually operate and how can we leverage that for brands, for out-of-home advertising? So this is the first thing that I would like to share with you. We know now that our brains function on the basis of neurotransmitters, and the objective of the brain is to get those neurotransmitters. The interesting thing is that different neurotransmitters correspond to different feelings. I buy an SUV and I get a high on that day when I bought the SUV because my dopamine levels go up. I buy a car, a Volvo XC90, it makes me safe and my serotonin levels go up. And so people who buy Volvos are the ones who are looking for serotonin. The guys who are buying a Toyota Fortuner are looking for more dopamine. And depending on the personality of the individual, we have a sense of what that person's brain is looking for. And therefore, what I should be messaging as a brand, what I should be talking about in my OOH. We all are looking for these different neurotransmitters, if you will. That's what our brains are configured to do. So in a sense, therefore, we will choose to pay attention to and act on an OH advertising that gives me more of the neurotransmitter mix that I want. If I am a person that we call as a promotion-oriented person, I'm always trying to maximize the upside, or I'm a person who is more inclined to minimize the downside, I will react differently to an OH advertising because I want something different in my head. In fact, a couple of financial institutions that one has engaged with are now working to profile their customers so that the pitch to the customer can be tailored to the personality of the individual. Now you could argue that in the digital OOH medium especially, where I have the flexibility to change the message, people who are going home in the evening to their homes have a different frame of mind, and even though they may be more risk-taking, normally in the evening when they are going home, the risk appetite might be lower, so my messaging should be different. So you could argue on this basis that my message should be different in the evening as compared to in the earlier part of the day. So let me come to the second key idea on how our brains work. We don't like to think. Our brains are lazy creatures. If you think about it, inside our head, we have got like 1.5 kilos of tissue. Body weight might be 60, 70, 80 kilos, so 2% of your body weight. that 2% of your body weight consumes 25% of your energy. That's a lot of energy. So it has a natural tendency to conserve energy. How does it conserve energy? It tries not to do the most energy intensive activity. What is the most energy intensive activity that it does? The most energy intensive activity that it does is to think consciously, deliberately, to use reason, logic to come to decisions. So we have a natural tendency to push stuff into the unconscious, because that is what our brain is configured to do, right? It consumes so much energy that we have a tendency to push stuff to the unconscious. And so therefore, we are configured to pay attention not just consciously, but a lot unconsciously, which has interesting implications again for any kind of brand building advertising, but even for out-of-home advertising. If I then push it into the example that some other examples that we are aware of, daag achhe hain, and so on. These are all areas, brands, which have chosen to appeal to our unconscious emotions. That's how they influence us. And so therefore for us, right, we have brands which have pushed stuff very deliberately into the unconscious. You know, for Maruti, most of us unconsciously don't want to buy a car, an expensive car that is a Maruti Suzuki brand, because, you know, in my mind, unconsciously, it doesn't belong there. A Maruti Suzuki car is something that is inexpensive, fuel efficient, it's reliable, got a great service network, resale value, but it's not an expensive car. I don't want to be seen in a Maruti Suzuki because I don't think it belongs there, you know, because that's what the consumer has pushed into their own unconscious. And so therefore, from an advertising perspective, what is one of the key implications? We will pay attention to internalize and act on an OH advertisement that ceteris paribus requires lower energy consumption. So this has implications for the design of what we do, what you do as putting up stuff on billboards, on OH, digital OH outside. Which component of your advertisement appeals, or your customer's advertisement appeals to the unconscious? Why do most of us like that Cadbury's advertisement? Because we can relate to it, and it directly connects with our unconscious memory of all of those years growing up. Kuch meetha ho jaye. It happens automatically. It becomes comfortable. My serotonin levels go up, and I like it. And because it is relatable, especially for younger people, your testosterone and estrogen levels also go up, so therefore you like it even more. It's a basic human instinct. Moving on, item number 3 over here on how our brains work. We like patterns. We like something that is comfortable. You know, I work with an electric two-wheeler manufacturer that is going to launch an electric motorcycle targeted at 22 to 35-year-olds who otherwise would have bought a Pulsar and an Apache. Now, when you're designing an electric motorcycle, a motorcycle that is targeted at Pulsar and Apache buyers in this country, you have to design it in a way that appeals to them, right? Because a Pulsar and an Apache buyer wants to buy a bike that looks like a performance bike. It should feel like a performance bike. So what are some dimensions of a performance bike that make it feel like a performance bike? One is, you like the act of accelerating through the gears, right? If you're a Pulsar or an Apache buyer, you like the act of accelerating through the gears. An electric bike doesn't need a gear. It doesn't require a gear. But because your research shows you that it requires that a gear, and the act of accelerating through the gears is an important part of what they have in their minds as a pattern of what a performance bike should provide, therefore I will put in a gear, even though it's not required. Of course, there are some ancillary benefits to putting in a gear. When you put in gear, the power draw from the battery becomes more optimized, and so the range of the battery increases. Other two-wheelers in the same category might provide 80, 90 kilometers of actual on-the-road range. This one will provide maybe 130, 140 kilometers because, excuse me, because you have put in a gear. And so therefore, you have put in an element of product design which is configured to fit the pattern that exists in the mind of the customer in that category, right? Most of you guys over here will see triangles. Do you see triangles? Or a star? Yes. But if I tell you that there is no triangle, there is no star, it's actually just 3 Pac-Mans. I don't know how many of you guys have played Pac-Mans, right? And there are 3 brackets. But even after I've told you that there are only 3 Pac-Mans and 3 brackets, even after that, you are still seeing the triangle, you are still seeing the star. That is the power of patterns, because in my mind, the pattern is already there. This looks like a triangle, this feels like a triangle, this feels like a star, so it has to be a star. And that's how powerful it is, which is why this bike company is building in that gear. So therefore, we will pay attention to remember and choose brands in an OH advert that are a fit with the existing patterns in the mind. So going back to the design of an out-of-home advertisement, does it actually fit what the customer is expecting to see? If it fits it, the likelihood is that they will connect better. Interestingly, at the same time that people are looking for a pattern, they're also looking for a contrast, right? We pay attention to something that's different, so something that stands out, something that sticks out. Our minds are configured to pay attention to something that sticks out. When we see something familiar, fits a pattern, gives me a serotonin high. I want serotonin. If I don't get serotonin, I feel depressed. When I see something that's different, that does not fit a pattern, it allows me to feel excitement. This is one of the reasons why we like variety. We get bored. And so therefore, this constant dance between fitting a pattern and being different, dopamine and serotonin, is taking place in our heads. And so therefore, for that reason, when you see the first 3 advertisements over here, they fit the pattern. The last one does not fit the pattern. It's different. The first 3 are what most shampoo advertisements will look like. And so you will see it and you will very quickly forget it. The last one does not fit the pattern. It's a contrast. It's different. It gives you a dopamine spike, so you are much more likely to remember it. So dopamine, serotonin, contrast, pattern, simultaneously the balancing act is what one has to do, right? The electric two-wheeler manufacturer that I was talking about, they are putting in a liquid-cooled battery pack and a powertrain. In India, most electric two-wheeler, not most, all electric two-wheelers which have been manufactured so far, they have not yet accounted completely for the fact that we are a tropical country where a bike or a scooter parked outside in the sun can actually face temperatures up to 60 degrees. Ambient temperature, as it is measured by the meteorological department, might only be around 50 maximum, Churu in Rajasthan. But the actual temperature outside for the bike might be 60 degrees. At 60 degrees, there's a good chance that the bike will catch fire, which it has. In the last summer, we have seen these stories of the fire. So therefore, what is the contrast that the bike manufacturer can put in? I'm putting in a liquid-cooled powertrain and a battery system. No other two-wheeler manufacturer, electric two-wheeler manufacturer has that difference, that contrast, the sheer contrast. Oh my God, these guys have a liquid-cooled engine. Let me at least check it out. So therefore, we will pay attention to and remember choose brands in an OH advertisement that is different from other brands in ways that matter, that give us a dopamine spike, acetylcholine, vasopressin high. Those are the neurotransmitters, that first principle that we talked about. We are looking for neurotransmitters that make us feel good, make us feel secure, give us a sense of survival, safety, and so on. And so therefore, the best brands, the best advertising, the best OH advertising will have these 2 patterns at the same time. You go back to the Cadbury's advertisement that you saw and that most of you guys liked. The pattern was that unconscious memory that you have, kuch meetha ho jaye. It's natural. We grow up in a culture that allows us to feel that way. It's there embedded in our memories. The contrast is that you did not expect the guy to come up with that line over there. That's the difference. That's the surprise. And so that pattern and contrast, the relatability, boy meets girl story, perpetual, something that everyone will like, put it all together, and suddenly you have an advertisement that makes an impact. The last idea that I want to share with you in terms of how our brains operate is this idea of mirroring. How many of you guys recognize what this little kid is doing? Anybody follows rap music? Yes, ma'am. Gangnam Style, right? So this kid is around, what, 7, 8 months, and it's trying to copy. Seeing something on the screen, and it is trying to copy. It turns out that we are wired as primates. We are, we think we are human beings, we are top of the food chain, and we think that we are really good at what we do and so on and so forth. We are superior to every other animal, but at the end of the day, we are primates. We are wired to mirror. If I throw this up and catch it in my hand and you're watching me do this, right? As you watch me do this, in your heads at the same time, the same set of neurons are firing that I'm using to throw this up and catch. That is what mirroring is. How do we know this? Some scientist, Rizzolatti in Italy 30 years ago, first saw it in monkeys, where they had these monkeys with the open head and electrodes stuck in the F5 area of the brain that allowed them to say that, okay, that monkey is eating, but this monkey with the open head is actually firing his neurons, as if this monkey is eating. So humans are also wired to do the same thing. We are wired to mirror, right? This is why when somebody behaves in a particular way, we kind of imitate, which is why, groups of people who kind of stay together for some time, they start behaving similarly. They are kind of imitating one another, which is why it's good to have a contrast, somebody different come in once in a while. So mirroring can lead to all sorts of interesting things like this. You imitate everyone else, what everyone else is doing. And therefore, the question for us, of course, is we will pay attention to and remember and choose brands in an out-of-home advertisement that gets amplified through others directly or sometimes indirectly, right? The Amul advertisements are a perfect example of this. They are masters at being able to amplify through the mirror neurons, through this constant bombarding of this little girl with the polka dot, which spoofs on contemporary events, or indirectly amplified through the social media, like you saw in the CVS pharmacy advertisement. So if you put this all together, essentially what are we saying? That there are these 5 things which are happening in our head, and these are the 5 things which taken together allow us to behave in certain ways. They make us behave in certain ways. And when I see an OH advertisement in the evening, during the day, in the morning, I will have different kinds of neurotransmitters going through my head. My brain will want different stuff. So actually, I was really happy to hear the gentleman from Ernst Young, I think it was, who said that the digital part is going up from 5 to maybe around 24% in the next 3-4 years. This is the single largest transition that one would want to leverage to be able to take advantage, utilize the power that OH advertising can potentially have for our customers. Because at that point, their minds are not engaged with many other things. I'm out on the road, I'm on the subway station, or I'm on the suburban railway, I'm stopped at a traffic light. My mind is mostly not otherwise engaged, and I'm open, much more susceptible to messages. I can actually capture the impact of those messages. By the way, I should have told you this in the beginning. We have now got a behavioral sciences lab at the institute where we can put these caps with electrodes on your head and actually measure the impact of messages. And we also have these eye trackers, right? It's just a piece of glass like this with cameras that allows me to see which part of the message you're focusing on, and taken together with the part of the message that you're focusing on, along with what's happening in your head, I can actually give you a reasonable approximation of what is working and what is not working, and why is it working and not working. And so for digital out-of-home advertising specifically, it offers a fantastic way to be able to put together the different media. All the 3 speakers who came before me, Mark Bracey, then Amiya, I think his name was, and the first gentleman, even Madhavan in his own way, kind of talked about different things need to come together, right? So out-of-home advertising, digital is one part of the larger set of things that people are engaging with so far as advertisements are concerned. And so therefore, if I can measure it in one, I should be, as a CMO, I would want to see what is the impact that this medium is having on the overall medium. Now, if there is good research which says that OOH is providing this percentage of change in the mindset of the customer, or this percentage of change in the sales, the delta sales that is possible, then suddenly OOH has a greater leverage in its conversations and its dealings with the marketing departments of companies. And so that's in a sense what we talk about in DOP in terms of brands. I've already mentioned that we make decisions in different ways, conscious and the unconscious. The last part that I want to leave you with is the fact that we form these memories, and a lot of our decision making is kind of rationalization afterwards. I'll buy a particular house, not because it necessarily satisfies this whole checklist, but because there's something that I like which I have not articulated before, but after I buy it, I rationalize. And that rationalization comes from the memories that I've picked up. What are the different kinds of memories? Whole bunch of memories. I'm just going to leave you with this. Your Cadbury's ad was essentially what we call as a procedural memory. It's a procedural memory that's deeply embedded in our minds. Kuch meetha ho jaye. It's in a certain part of your head called the striatum and the cerebellum. That's a technical part. London cab drivers, by the way, they have very large hippocampuses because they have to memorize consciously a lot of stuff, right? So if we are able to leverage these come out of culture. These come out of culture. And if we are able to leverage these, then suddenly my out-of-home advertisement, any advertisement, becomes a lot more powerful. One of the reasons this Cadbury's advertisement is liked by everyone, one of the reasons why Daag Achhe Hain is liked by people, is because they are constructed in a way that allows you to tap into this part of your unconscious memory. So, again, that's some technical stuff, so I'm not going to go into that. And if you want to get into people's memories, you have to have consistency over time. So if you look at this Pepsi logo over time, it's very consistent over time. That palette of red, white, and blue, the pattern in which it emerges is more or less constant over almost 50 years. So that's something to think about as you go forward. So therefore, that's how we make decisions. It's a combination of the brain operating principles: feel good, secure, conserve energy, patterns, contrast, mirroring. We make decisions in a combination of reason, emotion, conscious, and unconscious. And lastly, your memories kick into play, and it all comes together. And then you say, I like this OOH advertisement, or I like this television advertisement. I'm going to buy this tomorrow. Or, no, I did not even pay attention to it. So with that, let me just leave you with this one piece of research that we did. This got published recently. We collected data on the neural correlates of weak brand choice, right? Suppose you have a Samsung phone, and there used to be an Indian brand about 4 or 5 years ago called Micromax. So Micromax, not a well-known brand, Samsung, very well-known brand. If the feature set is similar and the prices are only marginally different, what would make someone choose a Micromax over a Samsung? What happens in his head when they choose Micromax compared to a Samsung? And so this research essentially kind of tried to figure out what's happening. And there's a particular part of the head called the anterior cingulate cortex where we resolve conflicts, which becomes a lot more active. And so the outcome of the research essentially is that any messaging which allows people to resolve this conflict in their minds is what will help a weaker brand to be able to get chosen in a much higher proportion than it normally would.